Fox News alert, President Trump is throwing his support behind a Catholic school student who is taking on the Washington Post over a viral video that was twisted by critics. In a new lawsuit seeking $250 million, a high school junior is accusing the paper of practicing a, quote, modern-day form of McCarthyism. You are watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here today, Fox business anchor Dagan McDowell, Fox News analyst and co-host of Benson and Harf on Fox News Radio, Marie Harf, and host of Kennedy on the Fox Business Network, Kennedy herself, in the center seat. He says he's ready. Joe Concha, media reporter and columnist for The Hill, radio host for WOR. Welcome.
I'm nervous. I'm never nervous on television.
Please.
I'm mortified,
You've
petrified.
got a lot to get to. You ready
Good.
for the news?
Every day we got a lot to get to.
I know.
It's the greatest time to be in this business.
All right, let's
Take
get
over.
to it. Kentucky high school student Nick Sandmann is now suing the Washington Post for defamation. Sandmann was at the center of a video that many in the media mischaracterized as an aggressive confrontation with a Native American activist at a pro-life rally. Then other videos came out telling a much different story. But much of the damage has already been done. The lawsuit is seeking $200 million. That's the same amount that Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos paid for the newspaper back in 2013. In a statement, Sandmann's attorneys accusing the Post of, quote, using its vast financial resources to enter the bully pulpit by publishing a series of false and defamatory print and online articles, which effectively provided a worldwide megaphone to entities to smear a young boy who was, in its view, an acceptable casualty in their war against the president, end quote. President Trump tweeted this today, quoting the lawsuit, writing, "The Washington Post ignored basic journalistic standards because it wanted to advance its well-known and easily documented biased agenda against President Donald J. Trump. Covington students suing WAPO. Go get them, Nick. Fake news, exclamation point." Joe?
The number here in terms of what they're suing for, Harris, is kind of irrelevant, right? $250 million. That's not the point. If he gets $250,000, that's fine. It's the symbolism that matters to so many people who are tired of a media where accountability is no longer in play. How many times do you see people being suspended or fired or even apologies being given? And we saw this with Brett Kavanaugh, for instance. No due process. Guilty until proven innocent. The Covington kids, guilty until proven innocent. Smollett, in terms of Trump supporters attacking him, guilty until proven innocent. There's this one great poll from Axios that came out last year. And this isn't my opinion. This isn't the opinion of other media critics that sometimes serve as cheerleaders. This is what the American people think of the media right now. 72% of Americans believe, quote, traditional media news sources report news they know to be fake, false, or purposely misleading. That includes 92% of Republicans, not surprising, but here's the big number. 79% of independents believe this as well, and even a majority of Democrats. This is from Axios and Survey Monkey, so not a right-leaning poll or anything like that. That is the gauge today, and that's why a lot of people are probably cheering this lawsuit, Harris.
All right, I kind of want to unpack what you said a little bit, Marie. I'll come to you. One of the things that Joe said, and we're hearing a drumbeat on this, is it's not about the money, although that $250 million figure, as I said in the opening statement there, is interesting because it's what Bezos paid for the Washington Post.
Yeah.
I think this is basically at root a political lawsuit. The language they use mirrors language Donald Trump has used. They've mentioned President Trump repeatedly in the lawsuit. So I think this is meant to draw attention to the case. I don't think this is about the money.
You think the case needs more attention?
No, actually, I don't. I think it needs less attention, quite frankly. But in terms of what I think his lawyer's strategy is, I think they want to make a political point more than a legal point, actually. And what will be interesting is if this goes through a court or judicial process, there will be discovery on any other videos that anyone else might have that shows any other piece of what these kids did that day. This will open up much more than just that one video many of us have seen, but much more information will now come into this. And that's a little bit risky, I think, for these kids. Who knows what else will be out there?
Well, if the bottom line is to find out the truth, and you've got so much that's come into play,
yeah.
Who is that most risky for? There was one side that was clearly tilting in one direction away from the kids.
I think it's actually most risky for the kids because the media narrative now is they were wrongly accused, they didn't do anything wrong. That's a general media narrative. If there is now more information found that gives a fuller picture, I don't know if there will be, but there could be, This could not uniformly be good for the kids.
All right, so part of that media narrative, Dagan, though, also has to do with the juxtaposition between the adults and the kids in that video. I mean, who was ultimately responsible for maybe walking away? Nick Sandmann has said, you know, he was intimidated in the moment, too much so to walk away. That was in an interview that he gave. I don't know about that, about the adults in that circle.
Well, by the way, the weekend this happened, within like a day, I think by that Sunday, I found the video, the much longer video online, but I had at least enough of a noggin not to retweet anything.
Right.
And to not weigh in on anything, because I am a member of the media. And I know that there is a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to making sure you have your facts straight. And that I can't just belch bile like so many other people in the media certainly enjoy doing, which was a huge problem over the weekend. But I'll push back on this. This is somehow just a political lawsuit. You don't think that this young man, who is a private figure, which does go into the legal equation in terms of damages done to him,
and a minor,
you don't think that his life isn't permanently harmed by this onslaught, by this mob of misinformation out there? Marie, you really got to be joking.
I don't think that these kids behaved perfectly here. I don't think there are some saints that we are putting on a pedestal that we need to give $250 million to. Sure, his life has been changed. And you know what? It would have been changed less if he had walked away, or if the parental chaperones there had
why
played
didn't
their
the adults
role.
walk away is my question.
Well,
I
where
want to
were
get
the
Kennedy in the
parents
conversation
there with the kids?
This is about the media and the behavior of the media and the standard.
I don't think the media was entirely wrong.
You have to show reckless disregard to sustain a defamation act. And if you read the lawsuit, which I did, they're fighting this tooth and nail, his lawyer.
Well, and the fact that he is a minor, and you know, now with kids nowadays, you have to tell them, as parents, you have to tell them, be very, very careful about everything you do and say that goes on social media, whether it's a friend putting you.
And by the way, assume it's going there, because everybody's got a camera.
And assume it lives forever.
Yeah.
So now, anytime an employer Googles this kid's name, he's going to be an adult very soon, and he's going to apply for jobs, and he's going to apply for, you know, potentially law school or business school. And is this something that will keep him from some of these opportunities? And that's where there is a greater responsibility. The one benefit from this story and the Jussie Smollett story is now not only do consumers of news have a lot more skepticism when they first interact with these stories that take their breath away, that make them so angry, that create an instant emotional reaction. Now people go, okay, let me pause for a second and see what else is here. Hopefully that also encourages media outlets and journalists to do the same thing, to pause for a second before this race to be the first one to post your outrage on social media, because that's what it's all about. It's about this insane race to be the first one to show just how mad you are.
There was something that Dagan pointed out, too, and as a journalist, I know where you're coming from. You know, Howie Kurtz and I had this conversation, I think, the day after on air, and we both said, well, we didn't click on that. Well, we're in that generation where, you know, it's a little bit different, the questions we ask. For instance, with the Native American activist, Nathan Phillips, my question was, he was the most adult person in the room at that point, at least chronologically, and I wondered why he hadn't walked away. And the last interview that I saw of him, he was still waiting for, you know, I want to get together with this young man, and he owes me an apology and blah, blah, blah. But where are we with the adults acting like adults?
Where are we? Well, all I know is this. I'll stay in my media lane here because I can't speak for Nathan Phillips, who has been proven to lie about a couple things since then in terms of his Vietnam service. Twitter will be the death of this industry.
Yeah.
Because there is no editor, there is no producer to stop somebody sitting on their couch who otherwise is a reporter you see on TV or in print who just wants to share their feelings in the moment without verifying. You talked about it being first instead of accurate. Let me unpack a couple things that Marie said. She said that there's greater risk to the kids. Half the country believed that Nicholas Sandmann was the perpetrator here and therefore became the face of racism. To Kennedy's point, what does this do for him moving forward in terms of job applications? This could follow him around for a long time. Let me quote Nikki Haley. I think she had a great quote on this. She said, "The media has to be responsible for the reporting, particularly when you have kids who have no ability generally to defend themselves against media reporting. They needed a legal outlet here, or legal resource here, to help advance this forward.
And this will advance the law covering the behavior of journalists and members of the media online, on social media.
Do we need to review our standards journalistically as a whole?
That's going to open up a whole can of worms for a lot of people.
But legally, I think the Washington Post has reviewed their standards of behavior online. In the actual lawsuit, it talks about the fraudulent account 2020 fight that pushed out this edited video, and they named the Washington Post reporter who reposted that video.
Interesting. This from the Vice President of Communications at the Post gave a statement to Hannity. We are reviewing a copy of the lawsuit. We plan to mount a vigorous defense. You're reading what they're going to have to defend.
And I think that everybody in this country, if you're online, that you need to sit back and say, why do I derive some sense of self-worth getting a retweet from Alyssa Milano or somebody liking something nasty that I have to
I agree with you.
I'd rather have an Amanda Bynes retweet, but that's just me.
I'd rather have like a Kennedy retweet. Anyway, moving on. No doubt we'll come back to the subject. The White House is plowing ahead with plans to build the border wall and facing mounting legal and potentially legislative challenges now. Why the Trump administration says construction will not be stopped. Plus, and California is leading the opposition to the border wall. The president is taking on the state over a failed $77 billion high-speed rail project. Could California be on the hook for the money that it took from the government?
Welcome back. The White House not backing down as the showdown over President Trump's emergency declaration is growing. House Democrats expected to introduce a resolution aimed at stopping the order. The timing of its release still up in the air. This as California leads 16 states filing a federal lawsuit to block the president's move. So far, the Senate not taking any action. Recent polls show most Americans oppose the president's move. Republican voters are strongly supportive of it. Still, there are signs the president is headed for a clash with some in his own party. The Hill identifying 10 Republicans that may break with the president and vote for a resolution condemning the emergency declaration. This list including Senators Susan Collins, Marco Rubio, and Mitt Romney. Meantime, Senate Democrats stepping up their opposition to the president's move, but even they don't know how this will end as the Supreme Court may have the final decision. Here's Democratic Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin. Watch.
I can't tell you what the Supreme Court will do. It's a 5-4 court in Trump's favor on most issues. I think it is a gross overstep in terms of the emergency power.
In the most recent legal challenge, the ACLU and the Sierra Club filed a lawsuit in Northern California seeking to block the order. Joe, let's talk a little bit about some of the Senate Republicans who might block a resolution like this. Is that list just wishful thinking on the part of the Hill?
I don't think so at all. Every time we see there could be opposition to President Trump, you always see Collins and Murkowski at the top of that list because they're the moderates. Mitt Romney wouldn't be much of a surprise now, would he, considering he's crossed the president in the past. So, no, Republicans have been outspoken on this in terms of some anyway, in terms of opposing. But here's the thing. So let's say Congress then passes in the House a resolution to stop this, and then the Senate actually doesn't have the votes to do it either. 4 only have to defect. Then it goes to the president. He's going to veto it anyway. And he explained it perfectly.
And they don't have that veto-proof majority in either chamber.
Right. So then if it goes to the president, he vetoes it, and he explained it perfectly. He goes, remember in the Rose Garden, they'll sue us in the Ninth Circuit, we'll possibly get a bad ruling, and it'll go to the Supreme Court. And then what we're going to see...
court after the Ninth Circuit.
Right, but eventually it'll end up at the Supreme, and just like the travel ban, it's going to come down to perhaps 2 votes. Neil Gorsuch and the irony of ironies, Brett Kavanaugh giving him a victory here. That would be amazing, but Justice Roberts, always a wild card.
Interesting. So Democrats are playing a risky game here because on one hand, they know if the president sets this precedent, then a Democrat president in the future can go ahead and move money around for the exact same thing. And Nancy Pelosi is just licking her chops at that prospect because they're convinced they're going to win 2020 no matter who the nominee is. But at the same time, a lot of these high-profile Democrats are painting themselves into a corner saying, oh, we cannot reappropriate money like this, which I think is fantastic.
Well, I think that's a legal argument, and we'll see what happens in the courts. But in terms of this...
So either you're completely opposed to it and you can't do it in the future, or you're going to let the president do it so you can do it in the future. You can't have it both ways.
Well, I think Democrats...
Not in my world.
Democrats are fairly united that the party does not believe this is constitutional. So we'll see how that plays out in the courts.
Unless Kamala Harris or Liz Warren want to do it when
no
they're
one's
president.
actually saying that. So when it comes to the Senate, though,
a lot of people have said that.
I think that will be very interesting is that there are a number of Republican senators up for re-election in 2020. People like Sonny Perdue, Cory Gardner, Tom Tillis, Joni Ernst. Some of these are not easy seats to win back. And so putting them on the record on this issue that traditionally Republicans have claim to hate executive overreach, even if this bill goes nowhere and the president vetoes it, putting Republicans in the Senate on the record will be a very interesting thing. And I think there could be more Republicans who vote with Democrats.
But let's talk about
as many as 10.
The structural implications of a vote like this. And there are a lot of people in Congress on both sides of the aisle who say they want to take their power back. The legislative branch has been so weakened. Does a vote like this, regardless of who the president is, take some of that power back? What does it say?
It might take some of the power back. One interesting thing, it's not just the Democrats maybe wanting to use the same powers down the road. President Obama, there were plenty of conservatives who were very upset by President Obama's abuse of executive power, abuse being a word up for interpretation. But Obama, the president then, was rebuked by the Supreme Court on recess appointments and environmental regulation. And his ruling on Dreamers and giving them work permits could very well end up being overturned in the court system as well. So it's not just how the Democrats down the road would use these powers again, but it's also the fact that President Trump is now handing this to the court system and how they could infringe on a president's actual legitimate use of emergency powers down the road in a real emergency, unlike a border, but the border issue, but in something more grave than that.
Take us home, Harris.
All right. Actually, I'm going to move on to the next topic. It kind of falls into all of this. Meanwhile, as California leads the states opposing the president's emergency declaration, the Trump administration is going after California for a failed $77 billion high-speed rail project. The Department of Transportation is threatening to cancel $929 million in earmarked federal funds for the project and exploring options to reclaim, claw back $2.5 billion that California has already spent of our taxpayer money. This after the Democratic governor announced that he was dramatically scaling back the project as it went over budget and behind schedule. He also, by the way, cited mismanagement. Trump tweeted on this yesterday, quote, "The failed fast train project in California, where the cost overruns are becoming world record setting, is hundreds of times more expensive than the desperately needed wall." Governor Newsom responding, quote, "This is clear political retribution by President Trump, and we won't sit idly by. This is California's money, and we are going to fight for it," end quote. Joe, I see you shaking your head.
Well, I think Newsom's a very handsome man. I was shaking my hand. Like, he should be in Scandal too, you know? I mean, that's a good-looking guy. That's what I was shaking my head about. But I'm also shaking my head because I think the president certainly has the upper hand here. He should go one step further, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Send in federal investigators to see how Californians got screwed out of their money, in addition to trying to pull them.
The governor called it mismanagement. I mean, that was one of the things that he enumerated. You may be very right about that.
It smells of corruption and embezzlement, quite frankly. How do you mismanage anything that much? And look, here's the bottom line. The president is right to say we should pull this money back because the specific proposal was for a high-speed rail between Los Angeles and San Francisco. You can't change it after the fact. If I ask my dad when I'm 17 years old, for $100 to go fix my car, and then I use that $100 to go buy beer to put in my other friend's car, that's not how it works. Either it's specific to the proposal or the money has to come back to the government until you can prove you know how to manage it and do things properly. This is one of the biggest debacles we've seen by any state government in history.
And Kennedy, what's so interesting about this, too, look at the dollar figure there. And the president saying, look, that's more than I'm getting to build the wall, which, by the way, the wall is going to be built anyway. Wouldn't it be interesting to claw back some of that money for that purpose in a state that already has a wall?
Well, how about clawing it back and giving it to taxpayers who already ponied up that much money? And people in California have been completely duped by this proposal back in 2008. It won by a very narrow majority. The project has changed so drastically. And, you see mismanagement, you see missed deadlines, you see cost overruns. And that is the future of the Green New Deal. If this is something you want to invest in, this is exactly where it goes. And then projects have to be shut down, and people who rely on this employment are out of jobs, and California is now out of so much money, and now even more federal money, because people like Gavin Newsom, who's been the second one in charge in California, has helped this gross mismanagement.
Yeah, it is really
by the
interesting. So they were going to re-up at one point and ask for $3 billion extra. And so that's not going to happen. But can we get our money back? You know what's interesting to me, Marie, who might be watching this from 37,000 feet of Gazalt view, is Nancy Pelosi. Because when you talk about the Green Deal, or what she calls, what is it, the Green Dream? She calls it a suggestion.
Or whatever.
She threw some shade, right, in the direction of not just the deal, but the deal's maker, AOC.
But the caricature, Harris, that you point out from Nancy Pelosi, or that this project helps
or just
foster,
the wisdom that she might have. Maybe you don't bite down so hard on this until you know all your facts.
It's reality.
Clean energy technology in this country, in many ways, is actually growing faster than the regular economy. Coal jobs are growing much less fast than solar, than wind. They're much more profitable now than they used to be. That is not the caricature of the Green New Deal. So this project, I agree.
No, there are direct correlations. It's not a caricature. It's the most expensive public works project in the country. It's not high-speed rail.
Kennedy,
it's built on existing rails that are outdated,
Kennedy,
they're old, and they can't support a project like this.
My point is that a lot of the green economy and clean energy economy isn't a debacle like this. And this project makes it easy to caricature people's efforts to help make the environment better.
Proliferate in the private sector.
It is proliferated in the private sector.
You know what? Natural gas is plentiful in this country, and it's cheap, and that is the private sector reducing emissions in this nation and making electricity or travel affordable for all Americans. And let me just leave you with this. If California is so hard up for this rail project, try and get the money from private investors. They can't.
We do need high-speed rail in this country.
So the point I was making with Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is she's waiting. She said she wants to see all of the suggestions. I was throwing you a bone.
No.
She's looking at this from the top. Real quick last thought.
The problem is that 5 Democratic senators have endorsed that Green Deal.
And she said, what are you endorsing? She said they like it, but they don't know what it's in it.
And some
was rather ironic.
Durbin said today, he goes, what is this?
Well,
literally, that's his quote.
So if the Republicans have a better idea for growing clean energy in this country, put it on the table and we'll debate them.
She says
so
she's
far,
taking all suggestions.
there's no other proposal on the table.
This is your party. I'm just quoting your party.
Since 2005, emissions from our electricity production have fallen 30% because of natural gas.
And we are still on target to warm.
Getting in the way of the production of it.
We are still on target for the planet to warm so much that it will be irreversible very soon.
Talk to China.
But unless India and China are on board with those proposals, they're the biggest polluters.
They've been reducing more than we have.
Y'all are going to miss that part, but here's what's coming. Fired acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe is doubling down on his claim that he told congressional leaders about the Russia counterintelligence probe. But now, a former top lawmaker is disputing that. Who's telling the truth here? Plus, 2020 candidate Bernie Sanders raising the stakes as some Democrats appear to be conflicted about the party embracing more far-left proposals. Oh boy, I bet this comes up again next. But is this what the base voters want now? Is that what they're demanding? Or will it be a problem in the general elections? A debate. It's hot. Stay close.
All of those ideas, people will say, oh, Bernie, they're so radical. They are extreme. The American people just won't accept those ideas. Well, you know what's happened in over 3 years? All of those ideas and many more are now part of the political mainstream.
So you're saying the party came your way?
Well, I don't want to say that. I think most people would say that.
New concerns for Democrats about the party's direction heading into 2020. Senator Bernie Sanders immediately making waves as he kicks off his second White House bid, but posing a challenge for other candidates. As the Washington Post puts it, quote, caught between President Trump and the left, Democratic candidates seek to avoid the socialism squeeze, unquote. President Trump tweeting this today, quote, crazy Bernie has just entered the race. I wish him well, exclamation point. Some of the 2020 Democrats appearing to be hedging their bets. Senator Cory Booker recently warning that Medicare for all will be difficult to pass. And Senator Kamala Harris applauding the Green New Deal, but adding that while some of its goals will not be achievable. Meantime, other 2020 contenders plowing full steam ahead. to the far, far left. Senator Elizabeth Warren unveiling a plan to fund universal child care through a tax on the very wealthy. Watch this.
When people say, so, that's going to be really expensive, and the answer is it is. This will be about 4 times more than we have invested in our children. But that's exactly what we need to do. We can pay for universal child care and a whole lot more if we just ask the 0.1% to pay a fair share.
Let's not even get into the wealth tax being unconstitutional, but Bernie Sanders making a familiar sounding promise while touting his Medicare for All plan. Listen to him.
Going to say, people, you're going to lose your current health insurance and employment. Yeah, but you're going to have the same exact doctor. You're going to have more freedom of choice under our proposal than you have under the current proposals.
Sanders' team says it has raised a record-setting $6 million in its first day. Marie Harf.
So I think this is interesting because in 2018, the way Democrats took the House back was by running moderates across the Midwest, across the South, across the Plain States. And the Democratic Party knows that. So I think there is a recognition that the other side will try to paint the entire Democratic field as far, far left and socialist, using AOC, using Bernie, using Elizabeth Warren. But what I hear from a lot of Democratic primary voters is job number one is beating Donald Trump, and they believe that someone more moderate, right, and they actually put Kamala Harris more in the moderate category, Amy Klobuchar, they want Joe Biden to run, they want Beto O'Rourke to run, they want Mitch Landrieu to run. These are people they think are the real future of the party based on how we did in 2018.
I want to get, just really quickly, I want to get Bernie Sanders' response to President Trump calling him crazy. Bernie Sanders, the senator, tweeted this in part. What's crazy is the president, who is a racist, a sexist, xenophobe, and a fraud. We're going to bring people together and not only defeat Trump, but transform the economic and political life of this country. Harris, take it away.
You know, we've only seen one incumbent lose since 1984. That was George H.W. Bush. It is really hard to beat an incumbent president. I think the Democrats have to figure out not just how to beat Trump, but how to break history. Yeah, and I'm really curious to know how they're going to do that. By the way, Bernie Sanders may be a bigger problem for every other Democrat in the race. He raised that $6 million, 5.9 in 24 hours after announcing, but he did it with individuals whose average was $27. We haven't seen that since Barack Obama. And that's problematic for Democrats because none of those people that you just mentioned seem to match up. I mean, President Trump already has a nickname for most of these people. Well,
Kamala Harris is raising a lot of money. Beto raised a lot of money from small dollar donors. I think what's interesting, Harris,
she's stepping in it right now with the whole Jussie Smollett thing. So it'll be interesting to see her dig out of that.
The historical precedent I would actually quote is the 3 presidents since World War II who have lost re-elections all faced a very serious primary challenger. None of those primary challengers ended up winning, but they so weakened the incumbent, whether it was Jimmy Carter or George H.W. Bush.
But not since 1984. I mean, just open air.
George H.W. Bush did. George H.W. Bush faced a very serious primary challenge.
Jimmy Carter was challenged within his own party. And it was actually, you go back to 1980.
That's what I'm saying. By a primary challenger.
The president did not win re-election
in 1980.
You see the Democrats putting up anybody in the group you just mentioned that can take out an incumbent.
Of Ross Perot.
My point is, if John Kasich
so maybe Howard Schultz could be the Ross Perot of this.
My point was that if Donald Trump gets a real primary challenger, I don't think they'll win the primary, but they could weaken him. That's another historical precedent we should look at.
Okay, but again,
this is
the two most popular governors in the country are Republicans. Hogan said today he's not.
John Kasich's going to do it. Just to put that
John Kasich won one state back in 2016.
He needs to ditch the angry guy thing because Kasich's got a grumpy old man problem.
It's really it is a war of ideas at this point, an economic victory, and Democrats have to realize that. I think some of the moderate Democrats that Marie is talking about, they realize that. They went and ran on local economic issues in their home districts where Republicans were vulnerable, and that's why they have control of the House. Socialism is easy to defeat in a general election. That's why these candidates have to be incredibly careful. They're talking out both sides of their mouths. You can't have it both ways. You cannot have full-throated Medicare for all, free college tuition, $15 an hour minimum wage, and universal basic income,
and have
no way to pay for it.
That's not technically
a government takeover of our health insurance system is socialism. No. Joe?
What this gives President Trump is a bold contrast. He is very good at simple messages. Make America great again, for instance. In this case, what do you want? capitalism or socialism.
It's not
that
capitalism.
That will be the theme of the 2020 election.
Okay,
we can talk about all the minutia. That's what we'll come down to.
If that's not socialism, then what is socialism?
But then when you have,
and don't just say it's the means of production. What is socialism? If you're saying that's not socialism, what is socialism? I want you to define it right now. If you're saying that's not what it is, what is it?
Well, I was actually going to say a government takeover of all of our main economic industries, which is not what's happening, except for Donald Trump is now picking winners and losers when it comes to certain industries with his tariffs. But let's just to answer
the airline industry.
Can I answer Joe's point,
universal basic income. How is that not a government takeover? $80 trillion over 10 years. How is that not a government takeover?
Go.
It's actually more like democratic socialism throughout parts of Europe, and we don't have a whole time to get into this. But
we're not Europe.
But to Joe's point,
how about that?
Donald Trump will try and make that argument, and I agree he's a master brander. I think if there's a Democrat on stage next to him who cannot be called a socialist, it will be hard to make that argument. Here's my point.
Here's a little fact. Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill outlaws private insurance in this country. Anybody can read it. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, and Kirsten Gillibrand all endorsed it, and they're going to have to own it every day until people go to the polls in 2020. No private insurance for everybody. Great.
Government takeover.
House Republicans pushing back, calling Democrats' latest probe of the White House a ridiculous conspiracy theory and saying there could be real consequences over it for Democratic lawmakers. Details and debate next.
Republican lawmakers hitting back after Democrats opened yet another investigation into the White House. House Oversight Committee Democrats citing unnamed whistleblowers on an alleged plan by the White House to help build dozens of nuclear reactors across Saudi Arabia. Those whistleblowers claim former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Derek Harvey, an official brought in by Flynn, worked on the proposal despite warnings against it. Congressional Republicans pushing back on the probe. Part of a statement from Republicans on House Intel reading, quote, "The attack on Mr. Harvey is a ridiculous conspiracy theory floated by media partisans and now shamefully championed by Democrats and Congress. Members of Congress who defame staff members for political purposes will be reported to the Ethics Committee." This is convoluted and weird. What do you think of it?
So it depends on if Democrats actually have the receipts they claim to have, the information that Mike Flynn and Derek Harvey, after being told to stand down on this, continued working on it for months. We've seen Mike Flynn has not always conducted himself in the most ethical way. So the reports we're seeing certainly raise a lot of really serious questions, and it is absolutely Congress's oversight role to get answers here.
Michael Flynn doesn't even work
but
in the national government
well,
anymore.
Derek Harvey still works in Congress as a staffer.
Yeah, but you can't single-handedly give a bunch of stuff to Saudi Arabia. Have they built or started building any nuclear reactors based on our technology?
The question about whether they were pursuing a secret nuclear program after being explicitly told not to do so is absolutely something within Congress's purview.
I mean, the wheels are coming off the wagon. Dagan, this is grounds for impeachment, right?
No, but it's not funny. It's actually a serious problem if they did this. It's a serious national security issue.
Question to Dagan.
No, I was just because this is what the Democrats do when they take over all of these committees, whether it's Gerald Nadler, Adam Schiff, Elijah Cummings. This is their bread and butter right now. And it's really to do, quite frankly, anything to embarrass the White House and even maybe discourage people from going to work there who might be valuable citizens.
I don't know how much traction this gets, though.
So I want to yield all my time to Joe Concha because my number one question is, Democrats, well, everybody says they can multitask, but they say they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They're going to have to do that because if they don't have the receipts, as Marie pointed out, they've got to have something to show for that turnover at midterm.
Democrats were sent to Washington to solve problems, to make the lives of the American people better. If they open up too many investigations, this will have what's called a boomerang effect. And I think that the Mueller investigation is the whole ball game. If that report comes back to be a dud, and we're seeing more and more leaks that there may not be anything that involves collusion, and it becomes a dud if there's no collusion between...
Collusion's not a crime.
It's not a crime, even if it is, all right? Even if it's seen that way. It's
conspiracy.
Court of public opinion. If there is no direct connection between Trump and the Trump campaign and the Russians and collusion, then this is dead. Meanwhile, polls are showing that 78% of Democratic voters want impeachment hearings now. If Democrats go down that road, you're going to see, I'm not saying a similar effect, but Bill Clinton Day one, after he was impeached, Gallup, his approval, 73%. You can overplay your hand here. If Democrats open up too many investigations, they're overplaying their hand, and the American people will be saying, you were sent to solve problems, not to open up 100 investigations on things we simply do not care about.
Well, they're already mounting defenses against a tepid Mueller report, saying he didn't push far enough. He didn't look at the businesses.
We
he
don't
didn't
know
look
what's
at his family.
in it. Why are we calling it
tepid?
Democrats?
That's a great
saying
question.
That. They don't know what's
I know,
in
but
it.
that's the defensive
Why are they
posturing already
commenting
from
when they haven't
Democrats.
seen it?
That's what I'm saying. They're already mounting a defense if it's a tepid report.
Expectations are being set.
Former FBI acting director Andrew McCabe with more explosive claims as he continues his book tour. He says he thinks the president may be working for Russia. Plus, he's sticking up for those now infamous anti-Trump texters. We'll talk about it all next.
Pete Strzok and Lisa Page were two people that served this country well. Good people make poor decisions every day. Pete Strzok and Lisa Page were two people that served this country well. Good people make poor decisions every day. Not one time in my working with them did I ever see anything that I perceived to be political bias or political influence in the decisions they were making and the work we were doing.
That was former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe defending anti-Trump texters Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. That moment just one of many to come out of numerous TV appearances he's been doing this week. McCabe also raising eyebrows after claiming he told congressional leaders about a counterintelligence investigation into the president, which faced no pushback from those leaders. He doubled down on that claim this morning.
I walked through a fairly detailed brief, which I won't share the details of here, of course. There was resignation at the table. We went forward, made that tough decision, announced it to the Deputy Attorney General and Congress in the way we're supposed to, and then we moved forward.
Meantime, former House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy pushing back last night, defending those Republican leaders while also accusing McCabe of being strategic with his words.
The reason he's doing it this way is Devin and Paul are not allowed to discuss anything that is said in a Gang of Eight meeting. I find it stunning that they would know about a second one and not say a single solitary word. And I will continue to not believe they knew about it unless one or the other contradicts it.
And when McCabe was asked if he still believes President Trump is a Russian asset, he answered with this.
I think it's possible. I think that's why we started our investigation, and I'm really anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
So, Joe, I want to ask you actually a media-related question on this, because I don't remember a time when we've seen so many people writing tell-alls so quickly after leaving, getting published, doing these huge book tours. This just hasn't happened before, has it? Or am I just misremembering things?
And it makes the president's argument for him that there were people working against him and his administration. You see James Clapper on MSNBC. You see a Comey book
on CNN, I think James Clapper's on
James
CNN.
Clapper is on, CNN. It's the former CIA director, Brennan, thank you, who was on MSNBC. And obviously it's usually almost always criticism. I'm amazed that these free media tours continue for the James Comeys, for the Omarosas, for the Michael Wolffs, who present gossip as gospel. All people that going into these TV appearances and these media tours have credibility problems, just like Andrew McCabe does. Let me read you something here. Actually, he said this on The View yesterday. He said, you know, we don't open investigations because we don't like someone. Then how do you explain Strzok and Page exactly and all those texts that go on? And here's what he said on 60 Minutes, quoting, Rosenstein was counting votes or possible votes on using the 25th Amendment. Today, he says, on if Rosenstein was counting votes, not that I'm aware of. He keeps contradicting himself, and that's what happens when you were thrown out of the FBI because the Inspector General found you to be guilty of 3 ethics violations, i.e. lying. Stop putting these guys on television.
We should point out he is challenging that legally, so we will see how that process plays out. Kennedy, I've always said people like Comey and McCabe are not perfect messengers. They do raise some possibly serious issues, though.
I think more serious issues have been raised about the power of the FBI and those who have the ability to spy on people and launch these investigations. And I think the launch pad is very questionable in this case. And I do think that Andrew McCabe is full of contradictions, not only from his time at the FBI and what he's saying now, but his own words within the last week. So he's saying something and then he says the diametric opposite the next day. So how are you was supposed to take him at his word, and I think the only way to do that is put him under oath and put Rod Rosenstein under oath.
And Jim Comey,
and
too.
really figure out
all of that.
What were these conversations about the 25th Amendment and whipping votes and trying to remove the president from office.
Through a legal procedure.
We were talking about investigations.
Put him under oath.
Well, Senator Lindsey Graham is now heading the Senate Judiciary Committee. He can subpoena Comey, Rosenstein, and McCabe and put them under oath and question them about what they've said to Congress in the past, what they've said in public. If they don't show up, they can prosecute them at the Justice Department. And if they lie in front of the Senate, they can prosecute them. And now that we've got a new Attorney General coming in, Bill Barr, he might just do that.
I'm not sure Republicans will like what they hear. Maybe that's why they haven't. We'll see.
Well,
okay,
we've heard
we have
lies so far.
Up on a break, but more Outnumbered in just a moment.
Thanks to media reporter Joe Contra. So what would you give this day grade-wise on the couch?
Oh, well, the pleasure's all on this part of the couch. I'm going to make that very clear. I would say an A+.
Well
You know
done.
why? Vigorous conversation, and everybody played nice in the sandbox. Equal time.
Did everyone play nice?
I don't know.
You're smiling
I
now?
love you, Maria.
It's cocktail time.
I hope you know that. That's right.
You got to come back after I grow my nails out.
What's your cocktail?
5 o'clock
Anything.
somewhere. We'll be
Literally
back.
anything.
Noon Eastern tomorrow. Now here's Harris.